Normally, when I'm talking about a show that's been adapted from a franchise, normally I will either have no clue what it is and what the original source material is, or I will be like a casual fan of it. It's very rare that we get something adapted that I am obsessed with. I am obsessed with Stranger Things. I am a massive Stranger Things fan. It is one of my favorite TV shows ever. I think it's brilliant. I think every single season just builds and builds and builds onto the mysteries, onto the style. So when I say I was excited for Stranger Things: The First Shadow, I mean it. Even that's an understatement. I was waiting with bated breath for this play. Unfortunately, it didn't really do it for me. So, what exactly did I like and dislike about Stranger Things: The First Shadow? And why overall did it not sell me completely on this prequel to the TV show? Let's find out. But if you haven't seen my face before, hi, I'm Ellie. I talk about theatre. I am the most chaotic theatre person on the internet. I do reviews, I do discussions, I do video essays, and if any of that sounds interesting to you, please consider hitting like and subscribe. It really helps me out, it helps out the channel. But let's dive into Strange Things. Well, I have seen Stranger Things. Now, 2 disclaimers before I start. Number 1, I saw this show in previews. That means there may be slight changes from the version that I saw. What I have done is I have spoken to people who saw it later in the run, spoken to people who saw it closer to the opening date when we kind of heard and assumed that the show had been frozen and the version that they saw was going to be the final one. So for the most part, I know that a lot of my criticisms do stand, but I do think that it is important to mention that and flag that up, because I do think because of that, it needs to be taken with a slight grain of salt. We know that a lot of these criticisms do still stand, but there may be some, or maybe some little details that did change after I saw the show. I had another one, and then I forgot it. What was the other thing I was going to say? Oh, it was this. Spoilers. I'm going to dive, immediately into spoilers. If you don't want the show spoiled for you, I would recommend seeing the show before you watch this review. Honestly, if you want a video about Stranger Things, I literally just made one, which is going to tell you all about what you need to know before you see the show. All about the merch, the lottery, everything you need to know. So you can go watch that if you want a Stranger Things video and you don't want to be spoiled. People who want spoilers, here we go. I think this play's biggest problem is that, especially for someone who is a massive Stranger Things fan, this adds nothing. This really doesn't add much, and it doesn't feel like a new story at all. It feels like a kind of recap on the, story of season 4. There's new stuff here, sure, that is undeniable. There is new stuff here. Patty Newby, for example. You know, there are things here, and there are reasons for it to exist, but ultimately it left me wondering why. And ultimately, as you get further into the play, it really does feel like they're kind of scraping the bottom of the barrel and really having to navigate the details so carefully because of the fact that we know that these characters can't see anything supernatural. We know that they can't know about the Upside Down before this date. So you're left with a lot of compromises that you're having to make because of the already existing lore. Now, there is a lot to praise Stranger Things for. I don't think its story is one of them, which is such a shame because I feel like the storyline is something that has been consistently good in the TV show. Here, it's quite weak. The plot summary is as thus. 1959, we are following young Henry Creel as he befriends Patty Newby, the adopted sister of Bob Newby. And while joining in on Joyce's play, they form a kind of friendship, and that starts to build up to be a little bit more. However, Henry's connection to the Upside Down starts to corrupt him, and we see how this starts to bring horrors to this town. Now, on paper, this isn't a bad idea, but I think the show's biggest problem is the fact that it has to focus on Henry Creel. Henry Creel is our protagonist here. But the problem is you have to make him likable. And in doing that, I feel like this play does a massive disservice to the series' most engaging villain. In previous seasons of Stranger Things, we have had, we've had really cool villains, like the Demogorgon is iconic, but these have all been like these monstrous forces and almost like animalistic, like the Demodogs, and even to a certain extent, the Goopy Mind Flayer. All of these are like monstrous, like giant beings, but there isn't that like villainacy behind them. They almost feel like they're working off instinct. Vecna changed that. Vecna felt a lot more akin to someone like Freddy Krueger. Like, a villain who plays with their food a little bit, someone who feels like there is that kind of humanity behind them, but it's still corrupted. And this origin almost makes it out, I mean, actually, not even almost, this origin makes it out like he's not a bad guy. Like he's being corrupted by forces behind him, like he's being corrupted by the Mind Flayer, which I really dislike the idea of, because it makes Vecna so much less villainous and kind of undermines his impact in the actual TV show. By doing this, you're losing a lot of the edge. You're using a lot of the really cool things about Vecna that make him an engaging villain. And the play can't even focus the story on other characters to mitigate this. It tries, because they add in Patty Newby, who is someone who can actually see a lot of these elements, who can actually go into the world of Henry Creel and join in with that side of the story, because she's not a character who shows up later in the storyline. We're gonna get back to that in a minute, because I have some thoughts on that. And so because of that, the B side of the storyline, the Joyce, Bob, and Hopper storyline, feels very disjointed. They're trying to work out who's committing all of these animal murders. They think that it's Victor Creel, and their big plan to bringing Victor Creel is to put on the play. Even though, for the past, like, few weeks, or like a decent chunk of time, Henry Creel has been missing. This plan is literally god-awful. I do not understand how they thought this plan would work at all. It honestly makes these characters look so stupid. And the fact that literally in every other season, kids younger than Joyce, Hopper, and Bob Art have so much better and more thought out ideas makes them look so silly. This all culminates in the school's, like, theatre being the final place, the final, like, showdown place for this play. And again, I think it's the least interesting location out of all of the final battles from Stranger Things lore. You gotta think, like, the lab, even, like, the school to an extent in season 1, the mall, and the actual, like, upside down at Henry Creel's house in season 4. There's so many really cool locations that the final battle takes place in, and a school play is the least interesting. I get what it's trying to do. You're doing Stranger Things on stage, and it's cool to kind of have a stage on stage, and yeah, it's like thematic, but I don't know, it's a bit lame. I feel like there's a certain scale that Stranger Things has kind of lauded itself with, that I feel like this is missing a bit. With an A plot that kind of undermines your villain, a B plot that undermines these characters that we've known and loved because they all come off as a little bit silly and a little bit goofy, you're not left with much. Which is why I wonder why a spin-off might have been a better idea. Then you're not limited by the characters and their journeys in the future. You're not limited by a lot of these things. Because a lot of the time, it feels like these characters are there for fan service. And then we can talk a little bit about the ending. Patty Newby needs to die. I feel like the biggest reason that this play undermines Henry Creel is because he never gets that moment where he switches to villainy. We never see that moment where he becomes Vecna, which I think if you're going to have this whole storyline where you're making him seem more sympathetic, you need his breaking point. And that breaking point for the whole play is building up to this scene at the end where he's going to kill Patty Newby. And the play doesn't kill her. Why? Look, Stranger Things, we know how much you like to kill the one character you're introducing every season. You do it every time. And the one time it feels like narratively correct to kill this character, they don't. Come on! If we don't see this version of Henry be like Vecna, if we never get to see the moment where he is truly corrupted, then it feels like we're seeing a completely different version of Vecna than the version that the TV show showed us. The play needs to kill Patty Newby in the most horrific way possible. Patty Newby needs to die. We need to see Henry Creel do something so horrific and so villainous that it feels correct that he goes off and kills children. He is a child murderer in season 4, and yet the play doesn't explore any of this. There needs to be that breaking point that is so important for his character, but the play doesn't do it. It would work. This play would work so much better if he had that one villainous moment. We see him kill, like, side characters, but the thing is, we're never really introduced to these people as people that you don't really get the impact of their deaths. If you kill someone who you've spent the entire play building up, a very strong relationship between him and her, you have that moment where he becomes Vecna. And that is what this play needed to be. It's a shame. I think it's such a shame, because this play has potential. There's potential in this story, but I just think Act 2 flubs it. A prequel is so hard to get right because you're dealing with the backstory of characters who are so beloved. Joyce is so beloved. Hopper is so beloved. Bob has one season, and yet he makes such an impact in that season that it feels so nice to see more of him. And yet you undermine them by giving them this plot that really doesn't show off their characters, really doesn't show off their thought process. And if it does, it doesn't really do a good job at making them look good at what they do. And you have someone like Vecna, someone whose story I feel like could be fleshed out more. It is nice to see a lot more of, like, the things that were hinted at and the things that we were given in exposition in season 4 be really explored, diving into his time in Hawkins and how he grew up and how he eventually went on to see Dr. Brenner. But by making him the protagonist, making him too redeemable, and not giving him that moment where he completely snaps and where he completely becomes the villain, you weaken the material that fans love. You've gone in and you've added something to the lore that takes away from it. And look, I feel like the fact that Patty Newby doesn't die means that she is going to have a presence in the next season, which, again, I feel like you're going to end up with the Marvel problem. The problem that Marvel has right now is because it sets up so much in the TV shows that not everyone watches, when you go and watch the films, you are left being so confused that you need to consume so much extra media that maybe some people can't get access to, that you're left being detached from what's happening in the films, and because of that, you get fatigued and you move away from it. You can't balance too much, and because this is not a TV show, this is not something that is easily accessible, people are struggling to get tickets at the moment. And yes, by the time season 5 rolls around, this will be on Broadway, this will be a lot bigger, and more people will have been able to see it, but you're still going to have a lot of people who live in Australia, where the show hasn't gone to yet. You're going to have people in Japan who love watching Stranger Things, but can't go to London to see the show. You can't have this massive detail in the thing. You can't have that be set up in the play and then focus on that for season 5, unless you're going to completely set it up in season 5 again. So what's the point of the play? What's the point of the play? Now, that's my rant on the storyline. Pretty much from here on out, I'm positive on the show. From, like, a production standpoint, This show is incredible. It is undeniably well produced. It is stunning visually. There are so many really cool effects. I do think, unfortunately, it suffers a little bit from what I dub. I love how I'm dubbing everything as the something problem, but I think it suffers a little bit from the Lion King problem. The first 10 minutes of the show are, I'm gonna do something I don't do a lot. The first 10 minutes of the show are fucking incredible. We start on this like boat. And we get this incredible sequence where they go into the upside down for like 10 seconds. We hear demogorgons and we hear these different things. And especially being on front row for this sequence, I was blasted with giant air cannons. I had like snow and like bits of foam falling onto me. I felt so immersed in those 10 minutes. And then the rest of the play doesn't really dive into immersive elements. This is what I call the Lion King problem, where you have the first thing that you do in your show be the most iconic thing. Because if the first 10 minutes are the most impactful, if the first 10 minutes are the most incredible thing, you've got the rest of the play left to go. So nothing quite lives up to the really cool thing you've shown right at the start. Lion King, Circle of Life. Circle of Life, you have animals climbing through the audience. You have everything culminating in the stage rotating and this Pride Rock forming. It's incredible to watch. And then when you get to the rest of the musical, it's fine. It's cool. It's good. It's good. But because you've had that really incredible thing at the start, it makes everything else look a little bit more weak. Even though it's not. Even though the rest of Lion King is great. You're still like, oh, but it's not Circle of Life. It's not that. And for Stranger Things, wow, it's really cool to see people floating. It's really cool to see these effects, but it's nothing like what you did at the start. Literally, the first 10 minutes are jaw-dropping. They are incredible. It's so good. And then the rest of the play, yeah, it's not as immersive. It's not as great, but there are cool effects, like the spiders, like the transitions into the mind void, like Brenner and how he's thrown into the ceiling. There's really cool moments, and there's really, really cool effects. But nothing lives up to that start. With that said, I think Stranger Things is undeniably a visually impressive show. It's stunning to look at, and the production value is off the charts. It's really well put together, and that does deserve a lot of praise. What else deserves a lot of praise is this cast. This cast are amazing. Especially Lewis McCartney, who plays Henry Krill, who really dives into the complexities of this character, and why I feel like it is a bit of a shame that we never get to see him go full villain. He does portray a lot of the mixed emotions of a lot of the push and pull of Henry Krill trying to be good and moving and being pulled into this bad side really effectively. He is a great protagonist to watch. He is really, really engaging. And honestly, the fact that this is his debut. This is his debut. It's incredible. He's amazing in this role. Same can be said about Ella Karina Williams, who has a tough job playing a character who we don't really know. There's a lot of nostalgia that's going to be instantly put onto characters like Joyce and James and Bob, and even, to a certain degree, Henry. That was me saying Henry Krill in one word. Henry. But Patty Newby is new. Patty Newby is someone we haven't seen. And you got to flesh her out in a much shorter time than, we've had to fall in love with Joyce, Bob, and Hopper. She's a really lovely presence in the show. She has this lovely spike in the show where she's like shy and then she builds up her confidence. And then as like the twist starts to set in and as Henry does become a bit more villainous and a bit more away from everyone and she becomes more scared of him, that shyness starts to creep back in. I'll talk about Joyce, Hopper, and Bob together, played respectively by Isabella Pappas, Oscar Lloyd, and Christopher Buckley. I really do enjoy their performances. Again, as I said, I don't think their plot is the strongest, but they really do capture the essence of the original characters. And honestly, Christopher Buckley looks so much like a young Bob. That casting is incredible. From like a visual perspective, he looked like a young Sean Austin, and that's literally amazing. Like immediately, I believe that is a young. That's a young Bob. Like instantly. I love their dynamic as a trio. I think that's really fun. I think there's a nice like line to draw between their presence in the show and like what they typically do with like the young cast in the TV show. They're pretty good, even if their plot is a little bit weaker. And there's amazing supporting performances from Patrick Vale, who plays Brenner, Michael Gibson, who plays Victor Creel, and kind of dives into a lot of like the war trauma that he has. From a production standpoint, I really like Stranger Things. I think it's a good play, and I would not be adverse to go back, because I feel like the spectacle and what it does manage to achieve on stage does work, and it does feel like Stranger Things. I think it lets itself down from a weak, messy story that probably needed a little bit more time in the oven and really lacks that impact and weakens a lot of the characters that I beloved so much. I love Stranger Things. I love Stranger Things. And I really, really wanted to love everything about this play. There's so much to love here. Like, as I said, cast, production standpoint, it's amazing. It's great. But story-wise, I wish it went in a different direction. But what do you think? As we know on this channel, theatre is what? Subjective. So let me know your thoughts. Did you see Stranger Things? Did you love it? Let me know everything in the comments down below. If you did enjoy this video, please consider hitting like and subscribe. It really helps me, it helps out the channel. Here's some links to my other videos on screen right now, and a link to my Instagram if you want to drop me a follow over there. But that's it for me today, and I hope to see you next time. Bye!